We're going to get started here in just a minute, everyone. Just allow another minute or two for our friends to join us via Zoom, via YouTube, or wherever you are tuning in this evening, and we'll get started here in just a second. All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our final webinar in this fall Wednesday financial aid webinar series. The crown jewel in the series, I should say. We are going to do a live demo of the 22-23 Fafsa. So no boring slides for me to click through tonight. We will go ahead and jump right in and get started here. But I'm going to go ahead and allow my moderators and colleagues to introduce themselves, and then we will get started.
Hi, everyone. I'm Suzanne Malley, the Associate Director for the Counseling Services. Welcome to tonight's webinar.
Hello, I am Kim Jorgensen, Associate Director of Technical Services, and we're happy to see you tonight.
Thank you both. So for everyone here, if you have questions along the way, feel free to pop those in the Q&A section of Zoom. We absolutely will be recording this session. I'm going to double check and make sure it is recording. Yes, it is. So we will, anyone who needs the link, we're going to have it posted within a few days of tonight, or otherwise you can always reach out to our office by email. We can get you that direct recording link perhaps a little bit sooner, whatever is easiest for you. But yes, with that being said, we will go ahead and we will start. So you will want to head to studentaid.gov. This is your landing page to complete the Fafsa. We will exit out of the little chat bot there. You can always ask Aiden questions along the way if you have any. But there's a couple avenues to get started with the Fafsa, right? You could kind of immediately log in here on the homepage, or if you do not have an FSA ID and password, your account. Students, you will need to create an account, and in many cases, one of your parents will also need to create an account as well. You can do so here, or if you hover under this Apply for Aid tab, this is probably the best place to start. You will click on Complete the Fafsa form, simple as that. Let that load here for a second. And so if you are brand new to the Fafsa process, if you have never completed a Fafsa, you can click Start here. If at any point you are logging on later to maybe make a correction to the Fafsa, or if you've done the Fafsa before, you can click Login under this Returning User section. I'm actually going to hop over to my little demo site here. So once you click that Start Here button, this is what you are presented with. So you will indicate if you are the, if you are the student and you want to access the Fafsa, or if you are the parent and you are filling out the Fafsa form for a student, or if you are a preparer, this is someone that perhaps you may pay to do the Fafsa on your behalf. But if you are here tonight, you do not need to do that, because we are going to walk you through everything you need to know. I'll be honest, probably the easiest way, the most traditional way to go about starting the process is for the student to click here and have them kind of initiate the login. I am a student and I would like to access the Fafsa. So again, you can log in immediately if you have your FSA ID, your username ready to go. Otherwise, you can click Create an FSA ID. I'm going to toggle that to see you are leaving the Fafsa form. So that will route you out to get your FSA ID and password created. Once you have done that, you can immediately start the Fafsa. You can go back to this section and get that going. For the sake of tonight, though, I won't head there. I will click Login and Continue. And I will be completing the FAFSA tonight as my alter ego, Larry last name. So we will go ahead and get his information typed in here. All right, y'all, bear with me that I do not have any typos as I get this logged in. All right, let's see if this works. Perfect. I think that worked. Here is your disclaimer to accept or decline. All right, we are not going to save that information. Okay, here is the homepage to start the FAFSA. As you can see, there are 2 FAFSAs actually available. There's the 22-23 FAFSA. That is for anyone going to school next fall. For anyone currently attending, that is the 21-22 FAFSA. So let's say, for example, if you are going to be transferring to a school, maybe this upcoming spring, you would actually be doing the 21-22 FAFSA. But for next fall, so high school seniors, a student that is looking to transfer for next year, that would be the 22-23. So make sure you kind of default to the right tab there. Worst case scenario, if you're not sure which one you need to do, you could do both. But we would go ahead and looks like someone's used this username and they had started but not submitted. For the sake of this demo, we're going to click start over and we are going to start from the beginning. All right, so the FAFSA asks you to create a save key. This would be kind of a temporary password if you do not finish the FAFSA in one sitting, which happens sometimes. Maybe you get distracted or you don't know an answer to a question, you have to quit midway, that's totally fine. You will want to make sure that you make note of whatever password you create here, because this password allows you to get back into this FAFSA. So if you need to log back in to make any corrections or submit and kind of finish the FAFSA later on, this is where you will utilize that save key. So I will type one in here and click continue. All right, so here are a bunch of resources to start. If you want to read through any of this before you begin, you absolutely can. All right, so with creating your FSA ID, it will put a lot of this identifying information in for you. So the student, your social security number, your first name, your last name, Larry last name's information has defaulted here. So verify that that is all correct. Like make sure that looks right. Make sure your birth date is correct. Sometimes you may mistype a number. Make sure your social security number looks right. Your legal name, use your legal name here, no nicknames. Make sure that all looks good before moving on. All right, so this will ask for your email and your phone number. One tip here for those of you that are maybe setting up your FSA ID for the first time, students, if at all possible, do not use your high school's email address or your school provided email. Some high schools will actually deactivate that email after graduation. So use a personal email address or maybe create a personal email if you have not done so yet for all of the college application, financial aid process, because you may not have access to your school email. I believe you can change the email associated with your FSA ID if you need to. So word of advice there, go back and change it, or perhaps just use your personal email from the get-go. That will be helpful as you go throughout this process. So you can put your email, your phone number here. If you don't have a phone number, no problem. Just identifying information. And then here will be your permanent mailing address, your city, your state, your zip code, all pretty straightforward. Verify that that information looks correct there. I believe you would have to actually go through and probably type that in. I think for this demo, it's auto-populated that. But it's going to ask you about your residency for the state that you live in. So in this case, it's asking Larry, have you lived in Maryland for the last 5 years? Yes or no. That typically is for the purposes of, maybe a state grant for the state that you live in. So we'll click yes here, and it's going to ask, are you a US citizen? So here's where you need to indicate yes if you are a US citizen, no, but you're an eligible non-citizen, so permanent resident, green card holder, etc. There's a couple other statuses there that do qualify. So if you are not quite sure, you can always hover over that little question mark bubble and it will give you a better description of the question and give you examples. And this is true throughout the entire FAFSA. So in this case, you'd want to indicate what your status is. If you are not a citizen or an eligible non-citizen, in this case, unfortunately, you would not be able to complete the FAFSA. If you're here in the state of California, though, you would be able to complete the California DREAM Act. That's kind of a similar application to the FAFSA for state financial aid. So we'll go ahead and we'll mark yes to this question and continue. All right, so here, what is your high school completion status when you begin college? So you will indicate if you will have received your high school diploma, or if you will have a GED, or if you were homeschooled. So one of these three options here, click high school diploma for Larry. And then what college degree or certificate will you be working on when you begin the 22-23 school year? So this question can get answered incorrectly quite often. In this case, for many students, if you're going straight to a 4-year institution, you would click first bachelor's degree. Oftentimes, if maybe you're kind of trying to decide between maybe a 4-year or a junior college, you might be tempted to kind of list associate degree, like general education. If you're not sure yet and you have publics or private schools, 4-year schools on your list, just go ahead and mark first bachelor's degree. That will work for both of those institutions. All right, and then it will ask, will you have your first bachelor's degree before you begin the 22-23 school year? If you're completing this down the road as a graduate or professional student, you'll probably mark yes to that question. But if this is your first time going to college, or if you're a transfer student, you've not received your first bachelor's degree, you're going to mark no to that question. All right, and then what will your college grade level be when you begin the 22-23 school year? So if you're coming in as a brand new first-year student, that likely will be never attended college or first year. But maybe you are a transfer student. In that case, you could be a 3rd-year junior or a 4th-year senior, depending on the number of units that you are transferring to the colleges that you are considering. So kind of answer that one carefully here. For those of you that are prospective students working on an undergraduate degree, you will not be marking first college grad / professional. Those are for students that are pursuing like their MBA, their PhD, their master's degree. For students working on a bachelor's degree, that is not you. So we will put never attended college / first year. All right, are you interested in being considered for work study? And you're like, what even is work study? I don't know. I'll just mark I don't know to that. I'm here to tell you, work study is a program that if you have financial need and if the school is able to offer this program to you, it allows you to find a job on campus and get paid as you work throughout the academic year. Essentially, being eligible for work study opens up more opportunities for you to work on campus. So even if you don't know, or if you're like, I don't really think I want to work, it's not going to hurt you to mark yes to that question. Sometimes those funds can run out, and some schools may only award that to you if you mark yes. You're not forced to participate in the federal work study program. So it's not going to hurt you to mark yes to that and then decide not to later on. But you definitely may want to just mark yes and move on from there. That will definitely be beneficial throughout that process. All right, we are moving right along. So this question is about selective service. In this case, our student Larry is male, And here it states that most male citizens and immigrants have to register with the Selective Service System. And it's going to ask you, are you registered? Yes or no. And this is actually no longer a requirement to receive federal student aid. So if you are not registered, you would mark no. And then do you want us to register you? You do not have to. The Selective Service System is essentially a military draft if the United States would ever need to move forward with a military draft. Hasn't happened for quite some time, but actually is now no longer a requirement for students to receive financial aid. So if you are assigned male at birth, this is kind of how you would move forward with answering this question. But ultimately, no, if you do not want to register, you do not have to, and you can simply move on from here. If you are assigned female at birth and you indicate that on the FAFSA, it will not prompt you with these questions. All right, this is where you will enter your driver's license if you have one. If you do not have one, no worries, you can skip this section. If you have a state ID, which is kind of similar to a driver's license, but just doesn't allow you to drive, do not put that here. This is specifically just for a driver's license number. This is just further verification if you're maybe in a financial aid office and maybe you don't have a student ID card yet, and maybe that office just needs to verify who you are. This helps in that case. All right, Larry doesn't have a driver's license, so we'll skip this question. Okay, so it's going to ask, this next section, kind of demographics, is trying to get at whether or not the student will need to provide parent information on the FAFSA. So that's what some of these next questions pertain to. So are you currently a foster youth, or were you in the foster care system at any time? Yes or no. And then here, this question asks for the highest school completed by parent 1 and parent 2. And I know this may seem a little bit confusing because at this point in doing the FAFSA, you actually have not indicated which of your parents is parent 1 or parent 2. So kind of keep that in your mind. If you have a 2-parent household, for example, think about who you want to list as parent 1, whether that's dad or mom or dad, vice versa. This question can be used to award state grant eligibility. I won't bore you with the details. It's not the most important question on the FAFSA, I can definitely say that. But answer this question to the best of your knowledge. What is the highest school level completed by your parents? If you only have one parent, and we'll kind of get to what parents need to be listed on the FAFSA as we move on, you would just answer for parent 1. You could leave parent 2 blank or just mark other or unknown. That would be fine there. So we'll say high school for parent 1, and parent 2, we will put college or beyond. And move on to continue. All right, we are going to add our high school, what high school the student graduated from. Couple ways you can go about this. It's probably just easiest to indicate the state that you live in, and then also the city, or perhaps the name of your high school. We'll put Buchanan High School, my alma mater in Clovis, California. Go Bears. So we will search there for the high school. And as you can see, if you put a city, it will list kind of all of the schools in that city. Here it is, Buchanan High. All right, we will click continue. Okay, and you confirm that looks right. The name of your high school, the city, and the state, and then move on from there. All right, so it tells us based on the information you provided, we've determined that you may qualify for aid. Awesome, let's move on from here. This is a section where we add all of the colleges. So if you are applying to more than 10 colleges, read those instructions there, but I will quickly summarize. You will list your first 10 schools on the FAFSA. Go all the way through the process. Sign and submit your FAFSA. You're going to need to wait a few days for your FAFSA to be officially processed by the federal processor. You will get an email when that is done. Once that is done, you will indicate, you'll log back onto the studentaid.gov website. You will indicate that you are now a returning user. You want to make a correction to this FAFSA application. Once you do that, you will kind of click through all of these sections. You'll want to go back to this school selection number. And you will remove out a handful of the schools that you listed to make room for your new schools that didn't make that first cut. Don't worry, that does not delete your record from the prior schools that you're removing. Your FAFSA is already processed. Those schools have your information. You just got to make room for the new schools. So this is a fairly easy way to kind of search. If you have the school's code, if you know that code, you can type it in. But if you don't, it's so easy to search without it. You can click your state here. You can put the city that the school is in. So let's say Stockton, for example, University of the Pacific. And then you can hit search. All right, and so here are 14 schools. Looks like it pulled up every school that had Pacific in the name, and it also pulled the rest of the schools in Stockton. So maybe it's a goal of yours. You're going to apply to all of the Pacifics. So we'll click University of the Pacific, Azusa Pacific, Fresno Pacific. Maybe you're only applying to those 3 schools, right? We will click those 3 and then we will move on to continue. So we are indicating that we want to send this FAFSA to those schools. And now it's going to ask you to list what your housing plan is. If you're not sure yet, answer this to the best of your knowledge. You can always work with the schools to go back in and make corrections. But this will help the school give you the most accurate financial aid award and the best, most accurate cost of attendance based on those plans. So there's on campus with a parent or off campus. For the purpose of this demo, we will just list on campus for all 3 of these schools. And at any point, you can remove a school, right? That would be what you need to do if you want to add more schools later on. You can adjust kind of the order that the schools are in. I know that seems a little strange, but believe it or not, there are actually some states that have a preference as to the order of the schools that you list. You can click on that link. I can tell you for a fact that for California, it does not matter what order your schools are in to be considered for state California aid for those that live in California and want to go to a California school. A California school just has to be on the list. So out of your 10 schools, right, as long as you got 1 California school on there, for those that are in California currently, you should be good to go. But if you are in another state and you're not quite sure what your state's preferences are, go ahead and click on that link. It will kind of open up a new tab and you can search for your state to see if they have a preference on this question. And then you can move a school up, you can move a school down, whatever you need to do if you need to make a change there. All right, we will click continue and move on. Okay, so a couple more questions about a student's dependency status, determining if they need to provide parent information on the FAFSA. So students pay close attention to these questions. This is asking you as the student, what is your marital status? We're not quite at the parent section yet, so keep that in mind. So students, if you are single and not married, you will answer that question accordingly. You will say single and you will move on. All right, and now this question is still asking you as the student, does the student have dependents, people that are supported by the student? So you as a student, do you have a child or children that will receive more than half of their financial support from you during the school year? Yes or no? Or do you have other dependents? So anyone other than a child or a spouse who lives with you and receives more than half of their financial support from you as the student? Yes or no? All right, a couple more questions here. So you want to read these carefully to see if any of these situations apply to you. As the student, are you currently serving active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces? Are you a veteran of the Armed Forces? At any time since you turned 13, were both of your parents deceased? Were you in foster care, or were you a dependent or ward of the court? As determined by a court in your state of legal residence, are you or were you an emancipated minor? Again, a couple of these last statuses here, you would have court paperwork in these scenarios. Does someone other than your parent or step-parent have legal guardianship of you as determined by a court? Again, court paperwork here in your state of legal residence. If none of these apply to you, then you click none of the above and you would move on. Okay, and then it asks here, on or after July 1st of 2021, were you homeless or were you self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? Yes or no? For this demo, we will click no. All right, so based on your answers, you are considered a dependent. So if you cannot answer yes or check those boxes to any of those questions, you do need to provide parent information on the FAFSA if you are under the age of 24. Notice how this profile had a birth date 2003, so the student is under 24. So they do need to provide information about their parents. However, if you are in a situation that maybe doesn't fit those criteria and you are unable to provide information about your parents, you can continue on with the FAFSA process, but it may provide a rejected FAFSA, it may limit aid eligibility. So if you do have a unique circumstance that's not quite well represented by those questions and you're not able to provide your parent information, please reach out to all of the schools that you are going to be sending your FAFSA to, and they can walk you through whether or not you may be a candidate for a process called a dependency override and what that may entail. Check out last week's webinar. We have online for more information on unique circumstances when the FAFSA is a bit of a misfit. So in this case, we will say I will provide information about my parents and click continue. All right, we have been talking about this question each and every week in these webinars. It is probably the most commonly, what's the word I'm looking for? Probably the question that's answered incorrectly the most, but the FAFSA is doing a really good job of trying to prepare you to get this question right. Who is my parent? Whose information should I provide? So we'll kind of walk through the statuses here. Do your parents live together, whether or not they're married or unmarried? Do you have two parents? Do they live together? If yes, you will provide information about both of those parents, parent one and parent two. All right, my parents, my biological parents were divorced or separated or are divorced and separated, and I live with one parent more than the other. If that is you, click here. Then you will report information about the parent you lived with the most in the last 12 months. If that parent is remarried, we will need information about their spouse as well. So a step parent in this example. The next status here, my parents are divorced or separated, and I live with both of them equally. It's going to be split time exactly 50-50. In that case, you need to provide information about the parent that provides you more financial support in the last year. If that parent has remarried, if there's a step parent, in that case, you will provide their information as well. Even if the step parent does not provide you financial support, even if they are not able or willing to contribute to your college education, their income still supports the household that you live in, and they need to be included on the FAFSA. Or if you were legally adopted, that is the last status here, you will report information about the person or people who adopted you. All right, so we will move on. Okay, for the sake of this example, we will state that the student's parents are married or remarried. So again, if your biological parents were divorced and you live more with mom, if mom has gotten remarried in this example, her status is remarried. That's the status she falls under. So you wouldn't answer divorced or separated if your biological parent that you live with the most has since gotten remarried. So just want to clarify that there. So we'll put married or remarried. When did your parents get married? Let's say, I'm just going to make up numbers here. 1982. They got married in 1982. All right. So here is where you will get to pick who your first parent is, right? So maybe think back to how you answered that question for parent 1 and parent 2 for their education status, their schooling status. You can always toggle back to that section if you don't remember, so that's no problem there. And you will type in their social security number. If your parent does not have a social security number, you will put in all zeros for this question. That parent also will be unable to create their FSA ID and password. So just prefacing that, they will need to print a signature page at the very end of the FAFSA if your parent is not able to create their own FSA ID. But if your parent does have a social security number, you can go through and punch that in, or your parent can do so. You will put in their last name. So let's make up a name for Larry last name's parents. We'll go with my dad's name, Paul, P for Paul. And then let's say date of birth. So we will do 10/27/1961. And then you will put your parents' email address. So we will do P last name at pacific.edu. P last name at pacific.edu. Hit continue there. All right, and now if there is a second parent, this is where you will put information for parent number 2. So we will get a fake social security number typed in here. We will do their last name. And this will be C for my mom. And then we will put a birth date. What do you know? These two lovebirds were born on the exact same day. Continue. All right, then it will ask, what is your parents' state of legal residence? So in this case, the student lives in Maryland. Have your parents lived in Maryland for at least 5 years? Yes or no? Oh, yes. Let's move on. Okay. So spend a bit of time on this section because this is one we want to make sure that we get right. You are going to be entering in information for other people that live in your household. Who are those other people? The FAFSA needs to know who they are. So this does not include you. You are already counted. Your parents are already counted. So right now we've got a household of 3. We've got 3 people, but let's figure out, are there other siblings that live in the household? Are there maybe other family members, relatives? Let's suss that out a little bit more. So are there other dependent children that your parents have? So a dependent child can answer no to those same dependency status questions that the FAFSA asked. So keeping that in mind, for example, if you've got a sibling that's over the age of 24, unfortunately, they don't fit in this criteria of a dependent child. But let's say maybe you have a sibling who's maybe a little bit older than you. Let's say in this example, they're 20. And they're going to school. We will use them in this scenario. You've got an older sibling, just you and that sibling. That will be 1 for this question for other dependent children. Same thing if you've got younger siblings, right? List how many siblings you have as long as they are living in the household and your parents provide at least half of their financial support. That's kind of key there. All right. And then this question can be a little bit confusing. How many other dependents do your parents have? So include your parents' other dependents. So think Common examples, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. Oftentimes, we have multi-generational families that do live with us. Keep in mind the qualifier here, they have to live with your parents. They need to be under that same physical roof. That is a qualifier. And they also receive at least half of their financial support from your parents and will continue to do so. Now, whether or not your parent claims this person on their taxes really doesn't have any bearing here. Your parent needs to be able to, essentially indicate that yes, they live under the same roof. And then also your parents provide at least 50% of their financial support. So you need to maybe take a look at the numbers and kind of see if that person perhaps or people can be considered as other dependents in this scenario. Let's say, for example, you as Larry last name, his grandparent lives at home. We will indicate them. And that parent does provide at least 50% of that grandparent's financial support. So we will list them there. Okay, and then here's a summary. So this is where you want to make sure that all of the numbers add up, because again, this question is commonly answered incorrectly. You are already counted again, your parents are already counted. So we've got three people there. We've got that older sibling, number 4, and then we have that grandparent, number 5. So there are 5 people in Larry last name's home. And now we need to answer the question, how many of some of those people are in college or will be in college actually for the next school year between July of 2022 and June of 2023. So you would not include your parents, you include yourself and any other people. So you are one person in college, but let's say in this scenario, if you do have a sibling that also will be attending school, in this example, I said Larry has a 20-year-old sibling who's also in college. In this case, there are 2 in college. So again, you count yourself, you are automatically 1. So everyone will at least put a 1 in this section. But if you have other siblings, other people in the household that are not your parents, you can list them if they will be attending school. Even if they're not sure what school they're going to, even if they haven't decided, but they're planning on going to college, you can list them for this question. All right, we are moving right along, everyone. So for 2020, have your parents completed their IRS income tax return or another tax return? So in this scenario, most people have their 2020 taxes done, so they will indicate already completed. What type of tax return did your parents file? A 1040, a foreign tax return, or a tax return in another US territory? Most commonly, we'll go with 1040. And then what is your parents' tax filing status? So for many married couples, they do file a married filing joint return. But perhaps there's another status there, maybe married filing separate. If you just have one parent, perhaps they filed as single or maybe head of household. So your parent would need to check their tax filing status. In this case, we will say Larry's parents filed a married filing joint return. All right, I will not be able to do a demo of the IRS data retrieval tool, but this is where you have the opportunity, if you're eligible, if that tax filing status matches, where you as the parent will be able, you know what, actually, I think I can I'll click proceed to the IRS. I'll kind of show you what it looks like. You will be able to try to use the tool that will transfer all of your tax information onto the Fafsa. If you're able to use this tool, if it transfers your information successfully, this is going to save you so much time. So you click proceed to the IRS. All right, and this is where parent 1 or parent 2, whichever parent has created an FSA ID, or if they haven't yet, they'll be prompted to do so, where you will type in your FSA ID and password to consent to use the data retrieval tool. Once you do so, you'll click continue. That will open up a new window that takes you out to the IRS's secure transfer page, where you would type in your name, your address, as listed on your taxes for 2020 to allow you to transfer everything back onto the FAFSA. But again, I apologize, I'm not able to demo that this evening just due to the capabilities of this demo site. But for some students, that doesn't work out, right? In that case, you do have to punch in everything by hand. So this is where the beauty of the FAFSA will help. It will tell you exactly what line on your family's taxes to find the answers to these questions. So have that 2020 federal 1040 tax return in front of you. It'll just take you a little bit of extra time. Okay, so it's going to ask adjusted gross income. We found that on line 11, 50,000. I'm making this up, everyone. I'm making up numbers. And then it's going to ask, how much did your parent earn from work? Wages, salaries, tips, etc. Very commonly, this is W-2 income. But it'll tell you exactly where you find this information on your 1040. So typically that's line 1. But maybe there's a couple other qualifiers here. Maybe you have a Schedule 1, a couple lines there, Schedule K1. If you don't have those schedules, you just put in line 1. We will say parent 1 earned 20,000 and parent 2 earned 30,000 equals 50,000, the adjusted gross income. Pretty simple tax scenario for this family. All right, enter the additional amount of your parents' income tax, or enter the amount of your parents' income tax for 2020. Again, you can find that on line 22 minus Schedule 2, line 2. We'll just say $1,000. I have no idea if that's a typical income tax paid on 50,000 worth of income. It might be a little bit higher, but we will roll with that. Okay, so again, these are still questions that pertain to the parent. A lot of these are uncommon, but we'll quickly review them. Did your parent have combat pay or special combat pay, perhaps for those in the military? Did your parent have any scholarship or student college grant or scholarship aid reported to the IRS in their income? If your parent is not attending college currently, that answer is going to be 0. Education credits. If your parent had any education credits claimed, you can find that on Schedule 3. Untaxed portions of IRA distributions and pensions, excluding a rollover. If you have an IRA rollover, you do not list that here. IRA deductions and payments to a self-employed SEP, simple KEO, is that how you say that word? I have no idea. And other qualified plans from an IRS 1040 Schedule 1. Again, you don't always have to know what these things mean, right? If you're a student and you maybe got your parents' taxes in front of you, if they're letting you type everything in, you don't need to know what these things mean. You just need to know where to find them. So it will tell you. And any tax exempt interest income, 1040 line 2A. So check all those lines. If none of these apply, you mark 0 and you move on. All right, a couple other things here to think about or consider. Any child support that your parents paid due to divorce, separation, or a legal requirement. Earnings from work under a co-op program offered by a college. Students, this may apply to you down the road, but this is still asking about your parents. Did your parent work in a co-op program offered by a college? Likely no. That would be 0. Or did your parent have any taxable earnings from need-based employment programs like federal work study? Again, likely no, but if your parent's going back to school and they've got a federal work study job on campus, I'm sure that scenario has come up at some point. They would answer that question accordingly. All right, untaxed income. So a couple other things here. Any child support that your parent received for all of the children in their household. Or housing, food, living allowances, paid members of the military or clergy. Okay, one thing that I want to kind of highlight here, because this is actually commonly skipped, payments to tax-deferred pension and retirement savings plans. So this is either payments made directly or withheld from earnings This is found commonly on the W-2. So parents, check your W-2s carefully. Look at boxes 12A through 12D, and then look for these codes, D, E, F, G, H, and S. Do not report anything though that has code DD, double D. That would be your employer's contribution to your health benefits. This question is asking for payments you made to a tax-deferred pension or retirement plan in 2020. Again, people miss this one because you kind of have to pull out the W-2. It's not always in your tax packet, so keep that in mind. Veterans non-education benefits or other untaxed income, such as workers' comp and disability benefits. We get a lot of questions on this one. What kind of untaxed income needs to be listed? What doesn't need to be listed? Go ahead and click a question mark. If you've got a question, look at this. Look at all of these examples of what to include, what not to include, don't include all of these things. For example, untaxed Social Security benefits, SSI. Oftentimes we get questions about those benefits specifically. Do not include those here. But here is what you do include in that top section. So again, those question marks, those are your friend. If you're not sure, or you just want a little bit more information, you want the question to elaborate, definitely click on those as you move on. All right, parent assets. So assets are cash savings and checking accounts, investments, investment properties, real estate, things like that. As of today, does the total amount of your parents' assets exceed $5,300? Yes or no? If yes, you will need to list, current balance of cash savings and checking accounts for your parents, net worth of parents' investments, again, including real estate, but not your parents' house. Or if this applies, net worth of your parents' businesses and or investment farms. Do not include a family farm or a family business that has 100 or fewer full-time employees. So keeping that in mind. So you would indicate those numbers there. If maybe one section applies to you, but the other ones don't. Maybe in this case, we've got $6,000 in cash savings and checking, but Larry's parents do not have investments. They do not have a business or a farm. So you write 0 and you would move on. All right, we're almost to the end, everyone. Hopefully we'll have time. I know there's some questions that have come through. We will do our best to try to answer those, but we'll move on here. For 2020, have you completed your income tax return or another tax return? Keep it in mind, we're at the student section now. We've completed parents, students. These questions are going to be almost identical for you. Do not double report your parents' income. Sometimes students miss that these questions are about them and they report their parents' stuff. Again, that kind of doubles the family income. We don't want that, right? This is about the student. So students, for 2020, did you complete a tax return? Did you have earnings or file a return in 2020? Yes or no? If you're a high school student, you likely were not working as a sophomore in college. Maybe you were, I don't know. But in this case, we would click maybe not going to file. Larry didn't work, or Larry did, I will rephrase that. Larry did not file a tax return. So it says you're not eligible to use the data retrieval tool, which is accurate because we didn't file a return in this example. But it's still going to ask, did you have any earnings from work? So maybe Larry did work, but maybe he didn't make enough to have to file a tax return. Maybe Larry earned $1,000 right when he turned 15 and a half. He started working maybe in this example. But $1,000, again, depending on the type of work he did, in most cases, he's not required to file a tax return. If you are unsure, you're going to want to check IRS regulations. We can always guide you in that direction as well, if you're going to be required to file or not as the student. So again, all of these questions are identical. We'll kind of fly through them because we talked about them earlier. Child support that you as the student paid. Earnings under a co-op program offered by a college. Let's say, for example, those $1,000 that Larry earned, maybe later on down the road when he's in college, maybe he participated in a co-op program. That's kind of learning while working. You get paid, kind of like a paid internship, right? If that is the case, then you would want to list how much of those wages were actually earned with co-op. Maybe that is $1,000, it's equal. This offsets those wages to not count in the financial aid formula. Or maybe you had earnings from a need-based employment program like federal work study that we talked about. Maybe Larry's earnings were from federal work study. That was all his federal work study job. Then he'd put $1,000 here for federal work study. Those two will offset each other. But if Larry's wages were off campus, a part-time job off campus, something like that, likely these questions would not apply. If you are unsure as you move through college, we can always help you with this one. All right, untaxed income for the student, child support received for any children, housing, food, living allowances, again, payments to tax deferred pensions, veterans benefits, other untaxed income. Students, a lot of times these questions may not apply to you. It's very common, but again, you can always click on those question marks and that will help you figure out, does this question apply to me? All right. So lastly, this question's a little bit unique. Money received or paid on your behalf, like bills, not reported elsewhere on this form. This includes money that you receive from a parent or other person whose financial information is not reported on this form, and that is not part of a legal child support agreement. So kind of take a look at that question carefully. If that applies to you, you would indicate there. All right, student assets. So students, what is the total balance of your cash savings and checking accounts? As of today, what is the net worth of your investments as a student? And same thing here, business or investment farm. We will say Larry has $100 in his savings account, but he does not have any investments. He does not have a business. All right, moving on here. Just a note for my moderators here, Kim and Suzanne, I'm thinking we may not have a ton of time for some questions. So if y'all are maybe able to get back to a few of those folks that have some questions as we've been going throughout, that would be appreciated because we are getting close to 7 o'clock here. FAFSA can take some time, as you can see. If you don't use that data retrieval tool, it takes a bit of time to kind of go through everything, but not too much time, right? Okay, so we are not done yet. We need to go through and try to take a look, make sure everything is accurate, and then sign the FAFSA at the end. All right, so this is where you just scroll through. You make sure everything matches. If you need to go back and make an edit to a section, you can do that here. You would go back up to the top and just click on the numbers. That'll take you back to the section where you need, or you can just click on that question, right? If you want to change the answer to a question, you can click there. It'll take you right there. All right, we're scrolling down. This all looks good. This looks good. Everything is good. We did it all accurately. This is where, as financial aid administrators, if you need our help, this is where not signing and submitting the FAFSA is helpful, because we can take a look at this section and kind of give you some clarification on some of these questions. But if everything looks good, we are going to move on to sign and submit. Okay, so please read all of these disclaimers. This is like important legal stuff, right? So you are electronically signing and submitting that everything here is accurate, that you will uphold all of these statutes here. So I'm flying by it, but you need to read it. So we will sign and agree. And this is the student. I, Larry, last name. I agree to the terms above. Sign. We're not done quite just yet. Larry's parent needs to sign too. So here is where the parent signature is provided. So we will click provide parent signature. We'll indicate which parent we are signing at. So which parent has the FSA ID. It can be either parent, only one needs to sign. So maybe we will click parent 1 here. All right, parent 1 agrees to those same terms and conditions. And here's where the parent enters their FSA ID and password. So they will sign and submit. However, again, if that parent is not able to create an ID and password, there is another option. They can click other options, and this is where you would have the opportunity to perhaps print a signature page. That would require the parent to print and then mail their signature. So they would click print page. It will pull up kind of a sample page here, and you can get that printed. So for the purposes of this demo, we're going to move forward with that parent printing the signature. But if you have an FSA ID and password, or you have the capability to create one, please do that instead of printing the signature page. This would only be for parents that enter zeros for their social security number. It's so much faster to go the FSA ID route. So if possible, you'd want to avoid this option. But if this is the option that allows you to submit your FAFSA, this is the one we would want you to choose if that applies to you. So we're going to hit finish. Okay, so in this case, we've indicated that this family will have a signature page printed, but again, you can click another way to sign if that applies to you. All right. And you know what? I'll be honest, this demo doesn't let me move forward with seeing the final summary because we're not able to actually sign. So I think we have about 5 minutes left. We will try to answer as many questions as we can in the next couple minutes here. So Suzanne, if you can let me know kind of what are some of the burning questions that our audience has after this demo.
Great, thanks, Kaitlyn. We do have several questions about college savings plans. And where do you report them, and under whose income information do you report them?
Yes, thank you. And I apologize, I did not highlight that earlier. That's definitely a commonly asked question. So that would fall under the investments section. It's not quite a cash. Well, actually, you know what? I'm going to go back. To parent financials. I'm going to just double check on this one for everyone. We will go to the assets section here. Want to make sure that, all right. We're going to go back to question 88, cash savings and checking accounts. Okay, I'm going to hit this little question mark because I just want to double check if this falls under investments or savings. Okay, assets are money, cash savings and checking, other investments, investment farms, retirement plans. Give me 1 second here. 1 second here. Let me click on investments as well. Okay, this talks about investment properties. All right. Oh, ding, ding, ding. Investments include qualified educational benefits or education savings accounts, such as a 529. All right, so we got that answered. You would indicate that in this question here, what is the net worth of your parents' investments? A 529 in almost all accounts is a parent investment. You are the one that is like the owner of the account. Your student is the beneficiary. So you as the parent, if you started that account for your student long ago, perhaps or maybe very recently, right? You would list that for this section, the net worth of your parents' investments. It's not a student asset in almost all cases.
Great. The next question is about the household size. If my parents support my grandparents and claim them as dependents on their tax return, but they do not live with us, can they be included in the household?
Great question. And unfortunately not. The way that question is worded on the FAFSA, that person does have to physically reside in the same household. So if they live elsewhere, unfortunately, they would not be listed as a household member for financial aid purposes. Great question, though. All right, I think we have time maybe for 1 or 2 more this evening before we let y'all go.
Let's take 1 more. Once you submit your FAFSA, can you still make changes?
Yes, absolutely. So you're going to want to wait a couple days. Once you submit the FAFSA, if you realize you made a mistake, that's totally fine. You can always log back in and make a correction. Give it a couple days for your FAFSA to process. You'll get an email notification letting you know that it's officially processed. Then you can always log back in and make corrections. I do see one more question that stuck through here, so we'll make sure we get this addressed for you tonight. If you complete the FAFSA, but you notice that it didn't ask you for bank account and investments, that's totally fine. The FAFSA has a lot of skip logic built into the application, meaning that some families may not need to answer all of the questions. Just depends on the information you report, what your perhaps adjusted gross income is, things like that. Depending on your income, you may not need to answer all of the questions. So in that scenario, that's totally fine. If it doesn't present you with that, no need to worry. Or if it says, would you like to skip this section, you can definitely go through and skip that section. This is definitely recorded. If you want a copy, probably a little faster than us going through and posting it on the website, feel free to email our office, financialaid@pacific.edu. Otherwise, if we did not get to your question tonight, I definitely do apologize. I know we're kind of running up close to 7 o'clock. I think a couple other quick questions I can definitely address probably really quickly. Can schools verify the FAFSA once it's submitted and once you get the confirmation email? We might be able to. I know that we are still working on a couple tweaks in our software to be able to actually upload your FAFSA for next year. So you may be able to check on that verification faster than we will, but that should be updated here in the next couple weeks. And then will they use the same information from last year? So I'm not quite sure what your question there is referring to. You're going to want to make sure you use your 2020 tax information, but your FSA ID and password, that information, that is your login, that's the same login you use every single year. So I apologize that maybe I may have misunderstood that. Definitely feel free to get in touch again with our team if you've got further questions. We are at 7 o'clock this evening. I've got little toddlers that have to get back in the house that need to head to bed pretty soon here tonight. So thank you all so much for attending. I hope this demo was helpful. Once you leave Zoom, you will be routed to a feedback survey. If you've got a couple minutes, I definitely appreciate feedback. We read each and every one of those. This is the very first time we've done this session in this format. So I'm happy to hear any feedback y'all have. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. And again, feel free to get in touch with our team if we can provide any further support as you walk through the financial aid process. We're all in it together and we are absolutely here to help. Have a good night, everyone.